Welcome to Evil Done Badly, the worst true crime podcast on the internet. Now, we've been doing a bunch of old-timey, depressing, multiple murderers lately, and quite frankly, my lazy ass would like a nice, light, breezy, more modern case to do this week. I've had enough of it. So this week, we will be covering Jack the Ripper. Nope, not fucking doing old Jack here. Old Jack is too old-timey, he's too depressing, he's too multiple murdering, and maybe we'll get to him next time. This time, we're going all the way back to 2014, Silver Lakes, California, for another love triangle case that ends in bloodshed. This week, we will be covering the murder of Robert Limon and the silliness surrounding his death. His death is not the silly part. It's certainly not silly. It's quite tragic, and it's totally avoidable. But the perpetrators were not the most sensible people in the world, and they are paying quite the hefty price for their actions. So, let's see how this turns out. But, before we get into the case, grab yourself a beverage, hold on to your curvaceous arse, and let's hear the theme song. This episode of Evil Done Badly is proudly sponsored by the wide world of paranormal investigations and ridiculous thrifter groups on Facebook. They're both infinitely more interesting than this stupid podcast, and you should check them out. Thanks for listening and for signing up. Now back to the show. Silver Lakes, California is a desert town of about 5,000 people and is more or less the most wholesome, boring little place you could ever imagine. In 2008, Bob and Sabrina Limon are a tight-knit, religious couple with children and a nice, nutritious social network. Now, that sounds pretty good, don't it? You got Sabrina, you've got Bob, you got a couple of kids, and you got God. What more could any American family ever ask for? Well, as great as this sounds, it is a little boring. These two get bored as fuck with each other and decide that, hey, banging other couples would be an exciting addition to our everyday lives. Okay, great. So, they slap a big old pineapple out on the doorstep and invite the neighbors to come along for the ride. This is only a small town, but there's no shortage of bored religious couples to drink beverages and get it on with. Everyone is drunk and horny and pious, and for the most part, they're happy. These two would stay true to God by taking adult vacations, throwing wild, boozy shindigs at their place, and adulterizing like there's no tomorrow. So they're having a good time. They're sexually satisfied, and they're well hydrated. Things are going pretty swell, and they are living the American dream. Which is great. And a few years go by. There's a whole bunch of beverages that are consumed, and many of the horny couples in town are sampled. Now, Sabrina comes to the conclusion that she's already banged all the attractive couples in town, and now there's nothing left but people that are too ugly to get it on with. And she gets a little annoyed, and she suggests to her husband Bob that maybe they should just go back to church and go back to banging no one but each other, like the good book says. And while we're on the topic, speaking of a good book, you can check out the Evil Done Badly True Crime Compendium Volume 1 over on Amazon, which you can read for free on Kindle Unlimited, or you can buy in paperback. And I'm calling it a good book, and by good book, I mean it's terrible, it's annoying, and it's unnecessarily crude. I've heard nice things about it, so you should check it out. Where was I? Right. Okay, Sabrina tells Bob she wants to go back to church and quit banging the unattractive couples they find at the local bowling alley. In a startling twist, Bob here says that suggestion is unacceptable and that he would like to continue getting drunk and screwing other available swingers, no matter how attractive they are. He's not ready to give up on poking his dick into other willing participants. So she wants monogamy with her husband, and he doesn't want that. It sounds like a recipe for disaster there, doesn't it? Sounds like their relationship might be a little shaky. She wants to be with her husband exclusively. She wants to be with him exclusively so bad that she hooks up with a religious guy 10 years younger than her to have an affair with. She meets him at a local price club where they work, and they bonded because they were the only two people in the whole place that believed in Methuselah. On a side note, I guess it's not really fair to call it an affair if the husband is off screwing the neighbors. But in the eyes of God, they're all a bunch of dirty heathens and will be damned to eternal hellfire. Now, Sabrina here. She doesn't want to be a skank, and she doesn't want to have to spend the rest of eternity burning in the pits of hell for her blasphemous infidelity. She also doesn't want to be married to her husband anymore. So something has got to give somewhere. So her and her lover, 27-year-old firefighter, Johnathan Hearn, get to talking. They decide that if God is not going to be happy with their out-of-wedlock lovemaking, and God is going to boot them out of heaven, that's not a good thing. So they sit down together and they wonder aloud, how do they continue their passionate banging without upsetting the Lord Almighty? Well, the obvious answer is for them to get married. But how do you do that when you're already married to someone who loves you so much that they can't stop getting it on with everyone in town? This pesky spouse, he needs to go away. So they hatch a plan, and the plan is to kill Bob, the husband, so that God wouldn't mind that they were fucking all the time. That's some twisted logic. Using one major big-ass sin, the murder, to clean the slate on this pile of little, salacious sins they've got going. I'm not sure if God would, totally quite endorse anything like that. Either way. So, Johnathan Hearn and Sabrina come up with the most devious plan you ever heard of. Hearn goes online and buys some extra strength, fast-acting arsenic to slip into Bob's food. That'll do it. So Sabrina takes it, and she pokes some into Bob's banana pudding, sticks it in his lunchbox, and sends him off to work on the railroad with a kiss and a slap on the ass. Alright. Stop right there for a minute. I have a quick tip for anyone out there murdering people. Banana pudding is one good way to make sure your plan fails. I'd rather eat a dryer lint sandwich than banana pudding. This stuff is poison, even when it's not tainted. It's vile. Yuck. Now, funnily enough, this is not the only instance of someone using the vile substance known as banana pudding to try and kill someone. It's happened a few times before, and I think it's safe to assume that would-be poisoners choose banana pudding to hide their arsenic in because it tastes so bad anyway that you wouldn't realize you were ingesting arsenic while eating it. Now, all this assumes that arsenic in its poison form that you get over the internet actually tastes bad in the first place. I don't know. Maybe you can buy all sorts of flavors. Might come in grape flavor and lemon lime for all I know. I've never bought it, and I've never tried to poison anybody. Anyways, Sabrina gets cold feet with the banana pudding plan, and she decides that the poison pudding in the lunchbox will be too easy to trace, and she calls Robert up and says something like, "Hey, "Don't eat that pudding, honey. I think it's gone moldy." And Bob replies by not eating it, and he escapes the peril of, well, having to eat banana pudding for lunch. Phew! That's a close one. You wouldn't want to have to eat banana pudding, poisoned or not. And on August 17th, 2014, Bob is out working alone at the railroad, and he's just going about his railway business. So Sabrina is still scheming to get rid of him, when all of a sudden, he is conveniently shot and killed to death. How fortuitous! Problem solved. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery that had escalated to fatal violence, and as luck would have it, the man Sabrina wanted to go away was now no longer living. So, as serendipitous as that was for Sabrina, it was far from convenient for the authorities. They were now tasked to figure out who had killed Robert and why. So they go to the surveillance footage, and after viewing it from the surrounding area, they saw a bunch of people in vehicles, and they pretty much managed to rule out all the people on the tapes, except one. The police began their investigation by zeroing in on finding this guy who happened to be on a motorcycle, wearing a red bandana and a backpack. This sneaky fucker was all about hiding his identity, and the crime scene appeared to be staged. It appeared that most likely this robbery, that wound up being fatal, was absolutely sort of not the primary motivation behind the violence. This began to look more like a targeted murder. Oh my god, who could it be? What kind of cunt has the motive and opportunity to knock off a dude whose wife had previously attempted to knock off? Well, the dude who's knocking boots with the woman whose husband needs to be knocked off does. This is the cunt we are looking for. But we don't know that yet. So, do me a favor, forget I said that. As far as the town is concerned, for everyone involved, this was a huge shock and a complete outrage. Robert was a popular dude. Even amongst the people of the town he wasn't banging. Turns out they also liked him. And no one could see why anyone would want him to be dead. The town is still trying to deal with this tragedy. Why would someone kill this jewel of a sexy, swinging, tribal tattoo-wearing, handsome man? It'd all be very baffling if we didn't already know the answer. So a couple of weeks after Bob's unsolved murder, which is still very perplexing, Bob and Sabrina's next-door neighbors, they witness something, and it's just a little off-putting. They hear a bit of joyous commotion outside, and they look out next door, and they go out to see what's going on. Now, they see their neighbor, Sabrina, who is the grieving wife, and she's met at her door by a slimy-looking Costco worker carrying a huge bouquet of flowers. I know that people all grieve in different sorts of ways, but Sabrina here seems to have found herself a very stimulating way of dealing with hers. It's all in quite poor taste. And this is coming from me, the least classy person on the planet. Even I think it's rude, and I'm as uncouth as it gets. But shortly after meeting up with Sabrina and rekindling their love affair behind dead Bob's back, a friend of Bob's gets a weird message on his voicemail. This message is from none other than a Johnathan Hearn, and Bob's friend here has no idea who the fuck this guy is. This guy leaves him a message in which he expresses regret over what happened to Robert. And this friend goes, holy shit, that's fucking weird. And, why is Johnathan bringing this up now? And why to this guy? Either way, I can only assume here that this Hearn moron was feeling the weight of a guilty conscience and needed to speak to someone and clear up his standing with God. For some reason, he gives his name, and this friend of Bob's, well, he wastes no time in passing this information on to the police. The police scratch their heads, and they go, "What is wrong with this idiot? Why is he telling us this?" And automatically, Johnathan, Mr. Hearn here, he lands squarely at the top of the suspect list. The police look into it, and they learn that the wife of the recently deceased Bob and Mr. Hearn here have been breaking a few commandments for a while and need to be looked into. They also find out that Swingin Robert didn't like Sabrina banging Johnathan. Okay, I gotta wrap my brain around this for a second. How this is offensive to someone who can't quit banging other people is well above my pay grade. I guess there's some lines you don't cross when you're a swinger, and I have no idea what they are. Either way, Robert is offended at their courtship, and she keeps creeping around with Hearn despite his vehement opposition. It seems likely that one or both of them had something to gain by Robert's untimely demise. Johnathan wanted to gain unfettered access to Sabrina's vagina, and Sabrina wanted to gain a $300,000 life insurance payout for Robert being dead. It's starting to smell a little fishy here, and it has nothing to do with Sabrina's genitalia. So, the police don't fuck around, and they start listening in on these two fools' conversations. These guys, well, they spend most of their time talking about God, and they almost killed 4 agents from the boredom of it all. But they do incriminate themselves, but in some sort of cryptic Bible study type of way, and they stop short at directly admitting to their shenanigans. For instance, here's a quote from Hearn. Quote, "Hi God, we are on our knees for a reason. We have been dirtbags. We've been sinners. We've been selfish. And we sinned." End quote. Okay, that's, you're definitely up to something. And here's another quote from Hearn. Quote, "It's our conscience that bothers us when we recognize the dirty, rotten people that we've been. And God, we're sorry for that. Amen." Unquote. See, these dirtbags are definitely up to something. And, Johnathan, there's no worries there. As long as you make your peace with God, you're not going to burn in hell. But it's the folks here on Earth that are going to be difficult to convince of that. With any luck, they'll nail you to a tree or something. So the police start poisoning the well a little bit and feeding Sabrina pretend facts to make her sweat a little. Pretend facts. That's my favorite kind of facts. This podcast is full of them. But, I'm not that sweaty. Anyways, back to Sabrina. Sabrina takes these pretend facts and predictably runs right back to Hearn with them. She's smart enough to use a burner phone when doing so, but it doesn't matter because Hearn's phone is being monitored no matter what cheap piece of crap she calls him on. They fall for the bluff and get the feeling that the police are closing in on them. They keep talking and digging their graves. And in the meantime, the cops manage to wrangle up a warrant to arrest these Jesus fools and take them into custody. And upon searching Johnathan Hearn's home, they find a motorcycle, bing, a helmet, bing, and a red bandana, bang. Holy shit, it's not looking good for this guy. It didn't take long for his case to go right down the toilet. He's charged with murder. Boom, just like that. They release Sabrina because, well, they have a lack of evidence that ties her directly to it, and she just runs off with her kids to a place about 100 miles away from where she was. At this new spot, they are welcomed with open arms, and they are treated like lepers, due to the case being big news around these parts, and they are not that popular. So, Hearn sits in jail for just over a year awaiting his trial. A few days before he's about to go get his ass handed to him in court, well, he flips on Sabrina and he sells her right down the river in exchange for a more favorable sentence. He also claims to have prayed to God before shooting poor Bob. Well, there you go, Johnathan. I'm sure God's real proud of you there, guy. He signs on for 25 years and tells him that Sabrina was totally in on the murder plans. Well, she came up with them, according to Hearn. He tells of the banana pudding plot and that she gave him Bob's work schedule and the layout of the railroad facility to make it easier for him to find Bob and kill him. He also said that he asked Sabrina to divorce Robert so that they could be together. And he also stated that Sabrina said that divorcing Bob would be worse than killing him, as he wouldn't want to go on without her. What the ever-loving fuck? Get over yourself, Sabrina. This guy, he has no trouble hooking up with people. You leaving him would not be the end of the world, and certainly would have not killed him. He would still be sexy and swinging without you. You're not all that. So in other words, what we're saying here is that she was doing Robert a favor by having him killed. Living without her would have been cruel and unusual punishment. She was just saving him a life of lonely agony. Holy fuck. Sabrina here must think she's awful lovable or something. But nope, she is not. And she's arrested 2 years after the murder and pleads not guilty to all 6 charges. She says that Hearn is just throwing her under the bus because he wants a more lenient sentence. Of course he is. He most certainly is in it because he wants a better sentence. But that doesn't matter. She's still a murdering piece of shit, and she's not fooling anyone. She gets convicted of 4 of the charges, including first-degree murder, and is now going to be in jail until at least 2040. Good for her. She's a cunt. And that's it for the murder of Robert Limon. Rest in peace, Bob. You did not deserve that. I hope you're having a great time up there. And now, it's time for an update. Let's see what's happening in true crime news this week. David Daniel was a 54-year-old landlord in New York and was having trouble getting his deadbeat tenants to pay their rent. On November 14th, 2023, he took matters into his own hands and did something bad. He walked into the police station and says, quote, I'm having issues with my tenants. I did something bad. Unquote. And upon investigation, the police find the 2 tenants stabbed to death in his basement. Yep, that sure qualifies as doing something bad. Not only did they find the dead tenants in the basement, they also found Daniel's girlfriend stabbed to death as well upstairs. And I can only assume here that she owed him money as well. According to Daniel himself, he was, quote, under a lot of stress, and that resulted in him having to murder people. I get that. I've been a landlord before, and I have no desire to ever do so again. I've never felt like murdering any of my tenants, but I can see how it can escalate to that. There's a lot of lowlifes around here, and I don't want them anywhere near my house. Fuck those guys. So, David Daniel faces life in prison without parole if convicted. They should totally look into bringing back the death penalty in New York. This guy seems like a proper candidate. Come on, New York. Get on that. And there you have it. Another factually inaccurate pretend episode of the worst true crime podcast ever, Evil Done Badly, is in the books. If you would like to reach out and suggest future episode topics, we can be reached on Instagram at evildonebadly or by email at evildonebadly@gmail.com. So, Thanks again to our 3 regular listeners, and I'm glad you're here. My name is Dick, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye. This is my new favorite band. This is The Dorks. That's DORKZ. And this is their hit song, Slack and a Half. And you can check it out on all major streaming services, if you would like so. Or you could just listen to it here, or you can turn it off right now. Either way is cool. Thanks for making it this far. Bye-bye. I'm not going, I don't care, I ain't moving my ass, I ain't going nowhere. I'm not thinking or using my head, I ain't getting off this couch until it's time for bed. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I don't do nothing, this much is true. Zip, zero, zilch, nothing's what I do. I found a new level, I ain't just slack. A league of my own, I'm slacking a half, Oh yeah. I ain't going outside, it's cold and I'll shiver. I ain't cooking food, I'm having it delivered. This one time I tried to work out, it didn't go so well, it didn't work out. My doctor said I should get a Fitbit. I said no way, I ain't getting one bit fit. I don't do nothing, this much is true. Zip, zero, zilch, nothing's what I do. I found a new level, I ain't just slack. A league of my own, I'm slacking a half, oh yeah. Oh yeah. I could keep singing, but that'll take a whole lot of effort, and I just don't have the energy for that, so I quit. I'm going home. Later, y'all.